maybe the intention this whole time has been to re-sign him.
You're listening to the PuckUps podcast. It's time to hit the ice with Brian DeFelice.
Welcome into episode 17 of the PuckUps podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, and thank you all for joining me. On today's show, we're going to talk about the Bruins' set of back-to-back games over the weekend against the Washington Capitals and the Pittsburgh Penguins. We'll preview their road ahead and ask the question, should the Boston Bruins re-sign Viktor Arvidsson? We'll get into all of that, but before we do, just a friendly reminder, if you haven't done so already, to please go ahead and subscribe to the PuckUps on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else that you get your podcast. And if you want to get in touch with me or be a part of the show, you can email me info@thepuckups.com. You can tweet at me on X @BrianDeFelice_, or tweet at the show @thepuckups. Now let's kick things off with the Bruins and Capitals game on Saturday. Not only was this a big game for the Bruins for the obvious, which is that Washington is one of the key teams directly chasing them in the Eastern Conference standings for that final wildcard position, but it was also a sneaky game for Boston because the Capitals had just gone through an emotional trade deadline day where they saw John Carlson get traded to the Anaheim Ducks. Now, Carlson is one of, if not the greatest defenseman in the history of Washington's franchise. He's also one of the best friends of Alex Ovechkin and Tom Wilson, and he meant a lot to that locker room. So while one may think that the Capitals would enter that game against the Bruins a bit down in the dumps, maybe not the most inspired group of players, we saw last year when the Bruins traded away Brad Marchand and Charlie Coyle, Brandon Carlo, Trent Frederick, and others, that sometimes when you're a seller at the deadline, even though long-term throughout the rest of the season, you're probably going to lose a lot more games than you win, sometimes there's a direct seller's bump where the guys in that room that didn't get traded feel like it's them against the world, and they probably feel disheartened but also insulted by their management group that they didn't invest in them, and there's kind of a will show you attitude that is more than likely short-term than long-term because eventually a lack of talent kind of creeps to the top. But you always have to be wary of playing those teams that just sold pieces away. These players are very prideful, and they aren't just going to go out there and roll over. You still have to play the game. And last year with the Bruins, yeah, when they sold all those pieces, they definitely stumbled for the remainder of the year, and it was by design, and they ended up finishing fifth last in the NHL. But if you remember, their first couple of games, they came out and played pretty well. They beat the Tampa Bay Lightning on the road with a roster that was not very optimal to do so. They had a spirited game against the Florida Panthers where they beat them on Garden Ice, and Nikita Zadorov had that spirited bout against Sam Bennett that had the crowd on their feet. So you have to be prepared, especially when a team is maybe inspired by a management group that didn't believe in them. Hell, the Bruins also lost to the Nashville Predators last week when they just sold 3 or 4 players, and Ryan O'Reilly, their top center, wasn't even in the lineup. So it was anything but a sure thing that the Bruins were going to find a victory against the Capitals on Saturday. And to their credit, even though they had something else stacked against them, which was them having to wear those putrid, disgusting Stadium Series jerseys, uniforms on Garden Ice. What a sin. When I saw that tweet go out on Friday that they were going to be wearing those uniforms in Boston, after I explicitly said on this podcast, I never want to see them again, the Bruins just didn't listen to me. They don't care what I think. How disrespectful is that? Let me ask you guys this question. If I made a petition for the Boston Bruins to never wear those uniforms again, would you sign it? Even if you're not a huge uniform fan or uniform buff, could you make a half Italian, half Irish kid with freckles happy and just sign a petition for me? That's all I ask. That's all I ask. Thank you very much. Let's get back to the game. So this was a good game by the Bruins. They ultimately found a way to win. They outshot the Caps 30-23. I thought the Bruins carried play in the first, despite what the national broadcasters felt, where they were applauding the Capitals for their first period, where they got outshot pretty handedly. And instead of giving the Bruins their flowers for a period well played, the broadcast was singing the praises of the Capitals for a strong road period, which I didn't get at all, because I'm pretty sure the Bruins were up. No, it was actually 0-0 after the first period, but the Bruins played a good first. They outplayed Washington in the first. The Caps outplayed the Bruins in the second. I'll give them that. Fortunately for Boston, Pavel Zacha was able to get a nice, nifty hand-eye coordination power play goal off the rush to get his 16th of the year and get Boston on the board 1-0. Alexi Protas would tie the game for the Caps later on, and we would go into the third period with a 1-1 tie. Who's going to take this win? And it's Viktor Arvidsson who gets the ultimate game winner for the Bruins. Arvidsson has been outstanding for Boston. I mentioned him off the top that there's a question we want to get to about if the Bruins should re-sign him, and I'll save it for a few more minutes. But Arvidsson's a guy that I've been wrong about. I'm happy to admit it. Entering the season last year when they traded for him in the summertime, I didn't understand it. I did not understand trading for him right before the opening of free agency. I didn't understand trading for a guy who has dealt with injury issues and production decline over the last few seasons. But to his credit, he's been outstanding for Boston this year, and we'll get to him a little bit more in just a few minutes. And of course, Boston ices the game with an empty net goal by Elias Lindholm, 3-1 win. So it was an impressive win for the Bruins, and they needed it after that stinker against Nashville. The hope was that they would carry that forward into Sunday against the Penguins. We'll get to that game in just a few moments as well. But nonetheless, it was a big win for the Bruins, especially when you consider the fact that it's a 4-point swing type of game. It's a game against a team that is just, a few points back from you in the Eastern Conference standings. And instead of the Capitals getting the 2 points in regulation and inching their way that much closer to Boston, the Bruins, they keep them down. And it was a big win for Boston. And we'll get to a missed opportunity on Sunday. But for now, let's go to Viktor Arvidsson after the game.
Marco has said he feels like you're playing your best hockey of the season. Just how do you feel in your role with the Bruins at this point?
No, good. Our line is playing well, and we're sticking together and playing a good brand of hockey, and it's competitive this time of year, and that's what I like.
Your line's been one of the more consistent. What do you think has worked with the three of you this year?
We have fun out there together and talk about a lot of stuff on the bench or in the locker room, and try to always improve our game, and I think we're doing a good job of that.
So Arvidsson, no doubt, is playing some of the best hockey of his Bruins career for sure, which has been short-lived so far. But he has been just such a resurrection project and such a reclamation project this year for Boston that you have to give Don Sweeney his flowers on this one. As I said, I was not a believer in the acquisition. I liked Arvidsson earlier in his career. I didn't like the way he was trending. But there's no denying what he's meant to this team this season and what that Bruins second line has meant to this team so far this season. And I just want to backtrack a second to paint the picture and the landscape of why there was even conversation in the first place about potentially trading Viktor Arvidsson at the deadline. A lot of Bruins fans, if not most of them, all said when the Bruins acquired Arvidsson, hey, you know what? Best case scenario, he has a bounce back season and you trade him at the deadline instead of losing him in the offseason for nothing. Because that's the other part of this equation, is that Arvidsson is a UFA this summer. Okay? So the idea was, if he plays well this year, that's great. Flip him at the deadline for as high of an asset as you can get in return, and then he's going to walk in the summer anyway. And in that scenario, we talked about, okay, if the Bruins can get a first round pick for Arvidsson, then how do you not do that if he's going to walk at the end of the year? But then there's a couple other things in play. A, it doesn't appear that a first round pick was probably on the table for him, even if the Bruins were willing to trade him. But B, the whole point about trading him at the deadline for an asset was under the assumption, and you know what they say about assuming, it makes an ass out of you and me, so I apologize for that. But it was under the assumption that he was going to walk this summer. Hence my question now, though. Should the Bruins re-sign him? Because it feels like all parties involved are interested in that. I think the player would love to re-sign in Boston. I think the coach in Marco Sturm loves the player. I think the GM in Don Sweeney loves the ROI he has seen on trading for Arvidsson. So maybe the Bruins never intended on trading him because they never intended on having him walk. Maybe the intention this whole time has been to re-sign him. And I and others just didn't really see that being the case. I think most Bruins fans assumed that he was just going to be a player that the Bruins are going to bring in and trade for to help reshape the culture of the room in a year where the Bruins are going through a big transition. But for whatever reason, it didn't really feel like he was meant to be here any longer than that. And it's starting to feel like he is. So let's talk about this for a second and see if he's worthy of re-signing. Okay? Right now, he's on a $4 million cap hit. So if he were to re-sign, you would imagine it would probably be something similar, maybe up or down a little bit. I'm not a capologist. I'll leave that to the math people out there to tell me exactly what he should be worth. But let's just call it 4 again, right? Okay. Now let's talk term. $4 million for what? 3-4 years? Absolutely not. No, no way in hell. If you're telling me that you want to re-sign him for 2 years at most, I can see the value there. Right? And I don't, not to say that Arvidsson and Zacha and Middlestad are going to be a line combination for the next couple of years consistently. And you have to keep in mind who the Bruins have coming into the system soon as well, right? James Higgins could be playing for the Boston Bruins over the next 3-4 weeks if BC's season ends. I mean, the Eagles play on Friday in the Hockey East playoffs against Maine. And if they lose that game, they're out of the Hockey East playoffs, and they could very well be out of the NCAA tournament altogether. They might not qualify. Okay, but either way, whenever BC's season ends, James Higgins is a player who's going to step into your top 9. We know that. And if it's not this year, we know it's next year, right? This time next year, we'll be having a similar conversation as we're having about Higgins, only we'll be having it about Will Zellers and Dean Letourneau, in my opinion. I think that after Letourneau's junior year at BC, there'll be a conversation about him signing pro, whether it's Boston or Providence. I think Will Zellers, after his sophomore year at North Dakota, I think he's a prospect that could be talking about signing pro in the spring of 2027. Okay, these are all players, these are all prospects that I'm talking about that could be playing for the Bruins during the course of a Viktor Arvidsson extension. That doesn't even include the possibility of the Bruins going out there and making a hockey trade for a top 6 forward or bringing one in at free agency. All right. So not maybe Arvidsson's that guy. Right. But my point is you have Elias Lindholm, who's locked up for the next 5 years. You have Pavel Zacha and Casey Middlestad under contract next season as well. And I assume that they'll re-sign Zacha. Middlestad, maybe. You have Fraser Minton, who is probably locked into your 3C role for the foreseeable future, right? And that makes sense. You have Geeky and Pasternak in your top 9, of course, your top 6. You have Husnudinov, who's probably a top 9 player as well. So I guess my question is, it's easy to watch the Bruins' second line right now and say, well, yeah, re-sign Zacha re-sign Arvidsson because you can have Zacha, Arvidsson, and Middlestad next year as well. And I'm not even disagreeing with that. You could run them back next year. But what does it look like in 2 years, right? Especially if we're talking about a 2-year term on an Arvidsson extension. And even then, you can find a role for him in the third line somewhere. So I'm not really worried about it. I'm just saying if you're pro Arvidsson being signed here in Boston, let me know what dollar amount and what term you think makes sense. And if you think it's 2 years at $4 million a year, something like that, then great. Where do you see him playing in 2 seasons from now? Do you see him just being a third line floater or something like that? So I can see them re-signing him, and it's important for the Bruins to have players that work in your system, that the coach likes, that the coach trusts. I get all that. And to be honest with you all, again, if you're not gonna trade him, then and you plan on him coming back, yeah, why not have him come back? Right? I mean, why not have him come back? So we'll keep an eye on that throughout the course of the off season. But more on Arvidsson right now. He's 6th on the Bruins in scoring. He has 18 goals, 17 assists, 35 points in 51 games. He's on pace for 25 goals, 24 assists, 49 points in 71 games played. You want an 82-game pace? 29 goals, 27 assists, 56 points. Viktor Arvidsson getting 56 points this year. Well, again, he's not going to play 82 games because of injury. So, but it's a pace, right? Him being on a pace of 56 points in 82 games, I did not see that coming. And again, his actual projection is 49 points in 71 games this year. So him being a 50-point guy, I didn't see that. I remember when they brought him in this summer thinking it would be tough for him to even get to 30 points. And that was based on his age, his injury history, and again, his productivity decline over the last couple of seasons. I needed to see it to believe it. But you know what? I'm seeing it, and now I'm believing it. Do I think he'll be this productive next year and a year after? I mean, not necessarily. I don't think any of us can predict that. This could be the best part of Arvidsson right now, which is something else you have to consider when wanting to re-sign him or not. Do you think that this is an abnormal year for him going forward? Do you think is it fair to expect 50, 60 points out of Arvidsson going forward in the next couple of years? Just things to wonder, right? Things to wonder. A little bit more on Arvidsson here. Since the Olympic break concluded, Arvidsson has 4 goals, 3 assists, 7 points in 6 games played. To bring that sample a little bit further, in the last 10 games, here are the Bruins' 5-on-5 points leaders in the last 10 games. Pavel Zacha, 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points. Viktor Arvidsson, 4 goals, 3 assists, 7 points. Jonathan Aspro, 6 assists, 6 points. Casey Middlestad, 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points. So right there is a perfect example of how much damage Boston's second line has been doing over the last 10 games or so. I mean, they've been good all year, right? I mean, I believe that their plus minus is second in the NHL behind Colorado's top line. So they've been together all year. Marco Sturm has very seldom split them up, and they've been a very consistent and reliable line for the Boston Bruins. And as a line, they are 3 of the top 4 5-on-5 scorers for the Bruins over the last 10 games. And it's been very evident watching Boston Bruins hockey the last little while that they're not getting much production at 5-on-5 from Elias Lindholm, from Morgan Geekie, not even David Pastrnak to an extent, and certainly not from guys like Tanner Jeannot and Mark Kaslick and Sean Corrali and others. Fraser Minton as well. He's kind of been a little bit snake bitten as of late. But let's support this. Here's where Boston's other top players rank in 5-on-5 scoring the last 10 games. Morgan Geekie is ranked 8th on the Bruins with 4 points in that stretch. David Pastrnak is ranked 11th. So that's a pretty sizable sample where David's not producing at 5-on-5 very well. He's 11th on the team in scoring at 5-on-5 the last 10 games. Elias Lindholm, 13th. Elias Lindholm was ranked 13th on the Bruins in scoring, 5-on-5 scoring the last 10 games. That's your top center, right? Just further evidence that Pasternak and Lindholm just aren't clicking at 5-on-5. I've been saying it till I'm blue in the face. I'll keep saying it until it is no longer the case. Okay, but the Bruins' second line has been very good, and Viktor Arvidsson has been right in the middle of all of that. And it was on full display in the game against the Capitals, where he was able to pull away and get a great pass from Casey Middlestad and go in on a breakaway and put one past Logan Thompson. It was a huge goal. The Garden had one of their louder goal pops in quite some time. And again, huge goal, huge game for Boston. So ultimately, would you, the listeners, would you re-sign Viktor Arvidsson if you were Don Sweeney? If so, give me a cap value and term. And if the answer is no, then just give me a no. Okay? And if you do think they should re-sign him, again, elaborate a little bit and let me know where you think he fits in the lineup over the next year or two, especially with younger players as most likely entering the fold as well, and potential players that aren't currently in the organization. All right. So that's Viktor Arvidsson. Would I re-sign him? Yeah, I think I might. I at least for 1 year. I would bring him back for one more year at least. And if you have to do 2 to get the player to sign, I wouldn't go any further than 2. Okay. So the following day, the Bruins play the Penguins and they get off to a 3-0 lead. You want to talk about the second line continuing to play well. Pavel Zacha scores 2 goals in the first and second period. The first one was on the power play, so we can't give the second line mates credit there. But on Zacha's ensuing 2 goals to cap off his hat trick, we definitely can. But we'll get to that in a second. So the Bruins get up to a 2-0 lead, power play goal by Zacha, and then Zacha gives him a 2-goal lead. In the second period, a great pass off the half wall from Viktor Arvidsson. And then David Pasternak gets his first goal, and I want to say 7 or 8 games on a wraparound, bit of a blunder behind the goal, 3-0 Bruins. Unfortunately for the Bruins, things start to take a turn for the worst when they're already shorthanded, okay? And Hampus Lindholm, who just has a knack for taking minor penalties at the worst time. I feel like he's put them shorthanded, 5-on-3 shorthanded multiple times this year. And this penalty really bothered me because, again, you're already on the penalty kill. You're up 3-0. You give a team an extended 5-on-3, chances are they're going to score. And now the game's gone from 3-0 to 3-1, as opposed to keeping it 3-0 or extending the lead. You give a team life, especially on home ice, and you're asking for trouble. And that's exactly what the Bruins did here. So Erik Karlsson had a neutral zone transition on the power play for Pittsburgh. The Bruins gave him ice. He took it. Hampus Lindholm had no choice but to get a hook or a slash, whatever the call was, on Karlsson as he was going right to the net. And do I blame Lindholm for the infraction in that moment? No. I mean, he was trying to impede Karlsson from a grade A scoring chance. What I'm annoyed about was the fact that that situation happened in the first place. Lindholm's gap was off. The Bruins as a PK unit just were caught flat-footed, caught in transition. And it just shouldn't have been the situation that they were in. But it happened, and Pittsburgh goes to the power play, 5-on-3 power play, that is. And Igor Chinikov scores a beautiful, beautiful wrist shot. I mean, that puck was in and out before you could even see it. And he was a good pickup by the Penguins from Columbus. And now the game's 3-1. Enter the third period, Connor Dewar. You know, Jonathan Aspero's playing a one-on-one. The puck goes down the ice. It's Dewar beats out an icing call. It's a foot race with him and Aspero. Dewar throws on the brakes. Jonathan's trying to stay with them. Not the best body position from Aspero, but again, things happen quick. Not the best back check from Zadorov either. But this shot just can't go in from Connor Dewar. It's a backhander from the top of the circle, it feels like, and it goes top shelf, far side. Korpisalo has to have that. I thought Korpisalo made some good saves early on in the game. when the Bruins had a 1-goal lead, and he had some grade A stops on Pittsburgh, some slot chances, but then you can't let that one go in. Now it's 3-2, right? Now the home crowd is in a frenzy, and the Bruins are on their heels a bit. Surely Pittsburgh's going to tie the game, right? Yeah, that's exactly what they did. So Anthony Mantha now ties the game. He breaks past Jonathan Aspro. Charlie, the Bruins are in good position here. McAvoy headmans the puck to Cast like I want to, or Tanner Jeannot. Tanner Jeannot gets stood up at the offensive blue line for the Bruins. But in this situation, McAvoy should have stayed back. But instead he jumps ahead and he gets caught up ice. Now it's a 2-on-1 situation with Aspro and Mantha, who just kind of goes by him. It was a 1-on-1 situation, not a 2-on-1. But Mantha had the better skating lane. Aspro was he was on the wrong side of the ice, and Mantha goes forehand backhand on Korpisalo. Now it's 3-3. Pavel Zacha, again, off a feed from Viktor Arvidsson, completes the hat trick, 4-3. I have to say about Zacha, 4 goals in his last 2 games. And especially against Pittsburgh, every single goal he scored was a fantastic finish. I mean, the one-timer on the power play from Geekie, beautiful shot. The finish on his second goal, nice forehand, backhand finish in the slot, excellent move. And then the hat-trick goal, just had to exercise good patience in the slot and pick the top corner as well. So Pavel Zacha with a fantastic game. That second line, again, fantastic game. You hoped it would be enough for the win and the 2 points, but it wasn't meant to be. Mantha ties the game 4-4 just a few minutes later. Again, not really much happening. I mean, Pittsburgh entered the zone and a couple of missed assignments by the Bruins. It seemed innocent enough. It really did, but Erik Karlsson gains the line. He gives it to Parker Wotherspoon, former Bruins legend, Parker Wotherspoon. He gets the puck on net, and then Mantha just, outmuscles people in front for the rebound. 4-4, off to overtime we go. And this was infuriating because the Bruins won the opening draw. And as we all know, in the NHL, winning possession off the opening faceoff is everything. And the Bruins do that. And Zacha wins the draw clean to Charlie McAvoy. What I hated about this whole sequence was that Igor Chinakhov was very, very assertive. And to his credit, and to the Penguins' credit, they didn't lose the faceoff and then just retreat into man-on-man like so many teams do. Chinakhov went right at McAvoy. He pressured him, and he forced McAvoy into a turnover, an ill-advised turnover. McAvoy didn't have to go up the wall like that. He could have gone back down low behind the net. But again, I don't think he was expecting the pressure. And to the Penguins' credit, they made things happen, right? Act, don't react. And unfortunately for the Bruins, McAvoy turns the puck over. Okay, Pittsburgh starts to do a bit of a cycle out high, and Erik Karlsson gets away with a pick play interference on David Pastrnak, which, let's be honest, it was absolutely an interference penalty. That said, and you may disagree with me here, I'd like to see David try to fight through that a little bit more. It felt like, to me, don't misconstrue what I'm saying, Erik Karlsson should have 1,000% been called for interference, and that's where it ends. I will just say it also felt like David helped it along a little bit. He was interfered with. Karlsson got in his way. He meant to get in David's skating lane. And maybe David did just genuinely go down with the contact and he was trying to fight through it. Only David knows. I'm just speculating. Watching it in real time, it felt like David recognized that Karlsson was interfering on him and went down a little easy to try and sell it rather than fighting through the check. Again, maybe I'm misreading that. Maybe David just went down 100% because it was interference and he was trying to fight through the check. Either way, it doesn't really matter. It should have been a call. Okay, it should have been a call. It wasn't. And Karlsson, again, he picks David. Chinakhov goes around Zacha, goes to the net front. Korpisalo tries to poke it away. goes off some bodies, off some skates, whatever it is, ends up in a slot, and Tommy Novak buries the loose puck and game over 14 seconds in overtime. Terrible way to lose. You cannot be giving away points like that when you are hanging on to dear life to the final playoff position in the Eastern Conference. I did not like that overtime sequence. I did not like the way the Bruins let the Penguins back into the game, starting with that Hampus Lindholm minor infraction to put them on a 5-on-3 power play. We all knew how that was going to end. Okay. Now, look, was the officiating great? No, but guys, it's never going to be perfect. There's always going to be missed calls. Always. Okay. And I mentioned after the game that this is now twice in the last, handful plus of games where the Bruins relinquished a huge lead and then ended up losing the game in overtime or a shootout. The first one was a Stadium Series game where the Bruins had a 5-1 lead. And we talked about it at the time. I know that the officiating, once the Bruins went up 5-1, was highly, in all caps, highly questionable and suspect. Letting Tampa Bay go on 7 or 8 power plays to end the game. No shit, Tampa got back into it. Okay, so I'm with you all where you feel like the Bruins got jobbed a bit in that Tampa Bay game. But as I said at the time, the episode after that game, you can't allow a team to have life, right? The Bruins gave up a goal to Tampa Bay on the power play to make it 5-2. I think it was an unnecessary penalty that I believe it was Charlie McAvoy who took a roughing call on Nick Paul, and there was just no need for it. And the Bruins go to the PK and they give up a goal, and then you have the goalie fight, and the penalties just snowballed, and Tampa got momentum. So yeah, the refs had some bad calls and some missed calls as well. Charlie McAvoy got tripped clear as day on the penalty kill, and it led to Sean Corrali closing his hand on the puck against Tampa. Tampa goes to a 5-on-3. They score. Should have been 4-on-4. No doubt about it. But the reality is the Bruins have allowed teams to gain momentum. They've put officials in a position to impact the game when the Bruins should have just iced the game themselves and not put it in other people's hands. So that happened against Tampa Bay, and it happened against Pittsburgh. Okay, you're up 3-0 and you're killing a penalty. You cannot go down 5-on-3. Of course they're going to score. Of course it's going to be 3-1 now. Of course they're going to start to get momentum. That crowd was dead. They were dead in the water until the Bruins went on a 5-on-3 kill and weren't able to get the job done. And now it's 3-1, and PBG Paints Arena, whatever it's called. Now they're feeling it. Okay, so let's get to David Pastrnak after the game and hear what he had to say about the Bruins' disappointing loss to the Penguins.
David, on their winner, I didn't get a good look at it. It looks like you got picked up high there.
It's man on man, and obviously the guy that I didn't cover and step into my lane, and hit. So, to me it's interference, but wasn't called. So, it is penalty. We've been playing 3-on-3 for some time now, and these picks, happen all the time. But to me, it's clear he stepped in my lane. So, Didn't got called, cost us a point, unfortunately. So, at the end of the day, we won the face, so we shouldn't even be in that position, and we were up 3-1. So, yeah.
And how did they get away from you?
They had a big momentum shift there, to when they scored that second goal. We just should have, played a little better because they scored right after 2 quick goals. So we were able to get another lead, and unfortunately made too many mistakes. Cost us the point, those mistakes.
Yeah, I think David summed it up pretty well, right? Like, there could have been a call on Erik Karlsson for interfering and picking David on that last play. No doubt about it. We're all in agreement there. Bit of a missed call, no doubt. But you have to take accountability and recognize that, hey, we won the faceoff. We had possession and we relinquished it. We had a 3-0 lead in the game and we relinquished it. We had a 4-3 lead in the game and we relinquished it. So it's easy to blame the refs. And certainly refs are part of the game. Of course, they're going to influence it, sometimes not in your favor. But to solely blame the officiating, in my opinion, is letting the Bruins off the hook and not holding them accountable for having a 3-0 lead and losing that game. And it's a big game to lose. You talk about 4-point swings against the Capitals. Was Pittsburgh a 4-point swing? No, because the Bruins did salvage the point in overtime, right? To at least get the loser point. But you had an opportunity to have a 4-point swing on the Penguins, and instead, it's a point swing for them. Okay, and they're a team that the Bruins are chasing in the Eastern Conference playoff race. I know Pittsburgh's in the Metro, right? But they're only a point or two outside of the wild card picture. They could fall back into the wild card. So you are competing with them despite being in the other division in the East. Okay, so disappointing loss for the Bruins, and they got to figure out their shit on the road, because the majority of their games to finish the season are on the road, and a lot of those games are against tough opponents and tough buildings. You have 2 games against the Columbus Blue Jackets, who are right behind you in the standings. They're playing good hockey, and both of those games are in Columbus. And we all know from the 2019 playoffs and other years for Columbus that they have a great home crowd. They have a hell of a fan base there in Columbus, and when they get rowdy, they get rowdy. And Boston, they're not exactly they're one of the worst road teams in the league this year. One of. Okay, they haven't won on the road in 8 games. They're 0-3-4 in their last 7 games on the road, giving up the first goal in just about all those games besides the Pittsburgh game, which is a stark contrast from their home record. At home, the Bruins have a 12-game win streak going right now, and overall they're 24-8-1, which is the best home record in the NHL. So why is it that they're so good at home, but they're so poor on the road? I know there are subtle differences on when you're the away team, such as not having last change, and that allows your opposition to potentially get some advantageous matchups. And I agree that there's probably something to that a little bit, but that's not the reason that they haven't won on the road in what feels like 2 months. Okay, it's more to it than that. I think they're too fragile between the ears when they're away from TD Garden, and I just don't think you can be that polar of a team on home ice versus the road. You're still this. It's still the same sport. It's still the same players. Okay, so I don't know what it is. In fact, a lot of times teams play better on the roads because they play freer. They don't tense up in front of their home crowd. They're not hearing the boo birds when you're on a power play and you're not getting shots through, or you're not gaining zone entries. You're not, you go out there, you just play hockey, and it's fun to be the bad guy. It's fun to play the villain sometimes, and I think the Bruins need to lean into that, right? They need to channel their inner Florida Panthers if they can. The Florida Panthers over the last couple of seasons, they've just been such a difficult team to play wherever you play them, but their game never changed, whether they're on home ice or on the road. And that's something that you have to respect about the best teams, is they just stay consistent. And I just think that the Bruins are too up and down, obviously. Okay. And I know that there's Bruins fans out there that will say, well, what do you expect? This team's been overachieving all year. This is who they are. Why are we surprised by this? And again, I think that's letting them off the hook a little bit too, because if you have a 3-0 lead in a game or a 5-1 lead in a game, I don't care who you are, what your expectations were heading into the year, what your roster is on paper. If you get to that point in a game where you're up 5 goals or 4 goals on somebody, or 3 goals, if you've gotten to that point, you should be able to keep it that way. That's how I see it. If you want to, if you're going to give up if you're up 3-2 and you lose the game, that's one thing. You're up 3-1, you lose the game, that's one thing. Okay. But to have a 5-1 lead against Tampa, a 3-0 lead against Pittsburgh, when you get up more than 2 goals in a game, that's when you really need to lock it down. So any time when a team relinquishes a 3-goal lead or more, I don't care who you are, you got to get that job done. And the Bruins haven't been doing that. And they've lost 5 of their last 8 games now. Okay. And so they're hanging on. They're hanging on. They're still in the playoffs right now. They're 35-22-6. They got 76 points, 603 point percentage. They're 5th in the Atlantic, only 3 points back at 3rd place in the Atlantic Division. And they have a game in hand on Detroit. Conversely, they're 3 points up on Columbus for wild card 2, and Columbus has a game in hand on Boston. All right. So as much as it sucks to see them give up some points in some of these games lately, and they've been playing .500 hockey since the Olympic break ended, And if you go back a little bit further, less than 500. But you look at some of these losses and say, hey, if they miss the playoffs, it's easy to look back at their 3-0 lead on Pittsburgh when they lost, or their 5-1 lead on Tampa and they lost. Sure. But as of right now, they are still a playoff team, and they still control their destiny, right? They're in the playoffs. They only have, I think Columbus might be the only team behind them that has less games played. So it's not like the Bruins have played a shit ton of games more than everybody else. They're on par with most other teams. A lot of teams have played more games than Boston. So they control their destiny. If they continue to have struggles on the road, which there's really no reason to think that they're not, give us a reason to be optimistic. They haven't done that yet. But if they can't figure it out, then you're going to start to see some teams behind them surpass them, and the Bruins' destiny will no longer be in their control. And they'll have to, hope that somebody else struggles down the stretch, and you don't want to be in that position. Okay. So looking at the road ahead, the Bruins have the Kings on Tuesday, the Sharks on Thursday, and then they play Washington on Saturday afternoon in the nation's capital. These are some sneaky games, right? The Kings, the Sharks, they have some good players, and the Sharks, of course, are led by Macklin Celebrini, who is just continuing to leave the hockey world in awe at how effective, creative, talented he is at such a young age, at 19 years old. And what I love about Celebrini more so than anything is his compete. He has all world skill, but it's matched by an all world work ethic on the ice. And he's a unique player. He's a unicorn out there. You don't see players come along very often who have the skill that he has and the work ethic that he has. A lot of players have one or the other, but not both, and very seldom at the age that he is right now. So you don't want to look past any of these games. I know the Pacific Division out west isn't the strongest this year. Okay, in fact, the entire Pacific Division would not be in the playoffs if they were Eastern Conference teams. That's how weak parts of the Western Conference are this year, at least in the standings, right? Some of those teams are perennial playoff teams like Vegas and Edmonton, but they're not performing great right now. Okay, so you have to take care of business if you're Boston. You cannot lose on home ice against the Kings and the Sharks if you want to be a playoff team. It's getting down to crunch time here. You got 19 games remaining, and every game is a must win. Are you going to win every game? No, but nobody else is either, right? That's the great equalizer. But still, they have some tough games on the horizon. You have, like I said, you have Columbus a couple times later in the year. You have Montreal, you have Buffalo, you have Detroit. You got the Bruins. The Bruins have, I want to say, the 4th or 5th hardest schedule remaining in the league this year. So it doesn't get super easy for them. And we'll see what happens. Some house cleaning to say here real quick, by the way. The Bruins re-signed Frederic Brunet. I'd be remiss not to say that. They signed him to a 2-year extension with an NHL cap hit of $875,000. So again, he's a player that I like down in Providence a lot. He's a left-handed defenseman. I think he plays both sides if he can play both sides if a coach wants him to. But I like him a lot. You haven't seen him in Boston very much, not at all this year. Saw him a little bit last year during when the Bruins sold off a bunch of pieces. He got a couple games late in the year for his NHL debut. Good two-way defenseman. I like him a lot. Hopefully he gets an opportunity at some point in the near future, and I think the Bruins are hoping that when he does, he can take advantage of it. Okay, so that's a nice little signing for the Bruins in their system. That'll do it for this episode. Thank you all very much for listening, and I will talk to you on Friday.